So, what with Halloween imminent, I thought it might be fun to talk about the scariest book that I have ever read. Now, as I've mentioned previously in past videos, it takes a lot for a book to truly scare me. And one of the very few that has ever managed to do it, which I have talked about before, is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. However, that was not the book that scared me the most. It was not the scariest thing I have ever read. The scariest book that I have ever read is Skin Medicine by Tim Curran. Now, I don't know whether this is an indie book or just very close to an indie book. It kind of has an indie feel to it. Um, and I don't really know much about Tim Curran as an author. I know he's mainly known for horror fiction, and I bet that is some fantastic horror fiction, judging by my experience with this book, which is the only one of his works that I read. Um, but this book was terrifying, or at least it was to me when I read it. Now, mind you, I read this years and years ago. I think I think I was actually still in high school when I read this. I think I was 17 when I read this, but that is still older than easily scared, I think. So I bet it would still stand if I read it today. But I remember this book was freaking terrifying. And it still to date is the scariest thing that I have ever read. But what a great book it was. So bear with me if I'm a little vague describing this book because, again, it's been years and years since I've read this. But I would not mind reading it again, actually. I probably should because I remember it being freaking awesome. Skin Medicine is a work of Western horror fiction. So it is I don't even remember, I ordered this book, I think, but I don't remember why or how I even came across this book. I don't remember how this even came to be on my radar, but I ordered it, I remember, and it was kind of unique because the Western genre is historically kind of hard to fuse with other genres. It doesn't always work like that god awful Jonah Hex movie that came out like in 2010 or whenever. That is a great example of a western being fused very poorly with another genre. And again, like that Daniel Craig movie, Cowboys and Aliens or whatever, with the it's a western fused with science fiction. Take it or leave it. It doesn't always work. However, it worked damn well with this book, I thought, because it maintained the gritty authenticity of the Western, but it was a seamless fusion with some truly bone chilling horror. So, this book takes place in post Civil War Utah, I believe, and the main character here is Tyler Cave, a former Confederate soldier turned bounty hunter who has been called to this small western town to track down a serial killer who is butchering prostitutes. And by the way, this book is graphic as hell. I remember reading this, and this was like, I think, at 17, I hadn't really read that many works of, true adult fiction. But this was one of the first ones I did read, and I remember being shocked at just how explicit this was in every way imaginable. It is unbelievably gory, and also it's downright pornographic at times. It holds nothing back, it pulls no punches in any regard, but the gratuity was not in substitute of genuine horror, rather, it was complementary to the horror because the horror in this was really well done. So, I'm not going to spoil the plot of this because I don't remember all of it. I don't think I can spoil the plot of this, but I'll give you a good rundown of what this book is like and I'll explain why it hit me so hard. So, this book is basically a fusion of that old Clint Eastwood movie, High Plains Drifter, and The Omen, of all things, and The Howling. If you take those three movies, High Plains Drifter, or Pale Rider, or kind of just any Clint Eastwood spaghetti western, if you take High Plains Drifter and The Omen and The Howling and put those things in a blender, you get this thing, and while that may sound like an incongruous pairing, it actually comes off remarkably well in this book. So Tyler Cabe is the rugged Clint Eastwood type anti-hero who is a bounty hunter and former Confederate soldier, as I said, and he is gruff and kind of world weary, and the your typical Western anti-hero. And he comes to this town to track down a serial killer, but he stumbles upon something of supernatural proportions and ends up facing off with an otherworldly enemy. Now, again, I can't even myself remember all the twists and turns that this book took, although I do remember there being an aspect of it towards the ending which was kind of cheap, just a little bit. I remember there was something about the ending where I was like, that kind of came out of nowhere. But that aside, this book was awesome. And the reason why it was so scary to me when I read it is because it's also a work of folk horror, I think, kind of like Midsommar and those kind of popular A24 horror films that are kind of like The Witch and everything, or The Vitch is because it's spelled with two V's or whatever. Um, it's kind of like that. There's an aspect to it like that, and that is where the true terror begins. So the central villain of this book is named Cobb, if I remember right, Jacob Lee Cobb, I believe. And it's the backstory on that character that is downright horrifying. And that's where the part where it's like the omen comes in the weirdest way. You don't expect it to go into that kind of direction. And again, I don't want to spoil anything, but that part of the book I remember everything about, because that part I was like, damn, my parents would not be letting me read this if they knew what was in this book. Um, there's this old witch lady uh, who's kind of like an herbalist for this town. But then something happens and the town turns on her because she's kind of an outsider and she lives on the fringes. And they kill her, but she does not go down easy. And even after she's dead, some really weird things begin to happen. And after some supernatural occurrences, this kid named Jacob Lee Cobb is born. And uh, he isn't entirely human, I don't think. And he grows up relatively normally, but then there's some stuff that happens in the mountains. I remember that where it goes like Donner Party real quick. It gets a Donner Party real fast in the mountains, and then there's some Indian folklore, it's almost kind of like Aztec stuff. It's weird, it's crazy, but damn was it effective. And it was all compiled so well. And that's all I want to give away, because that's all I really can give away. But this book scared the crap out of me when I read it. And again, like I said, this was something that I don't remember how it came on my radar, but if my parents had known what was in that book, there is no way I would ever been able to read it. But like I say, I don't know much about Tim Curran as an author, but I think he is a fantastic writer based on this, because I remember this being very well written too. Even at 17, my that tender young age of 17, when you don't really have much literary experience to base your reading off of. I remember this still being a very strikingly written book. It's gritty. You can practically feel the dirt and the grime of it, but it's also very well worded, and there's some really nice phrasing employed by Tim Curran. And I should probably really read something else of Tim Curran's, because this was such a great experience. I don't know whether this book is still available in print. I know you can buy it on Kindle, and I would highly recommend you to do so. You can still purchase it off Amazon on Kindle, but I don't think you can buy it in paperback anymore. That's why I'm kind of wondering whether this was an indie book or like a very small press kind of book. But it deserved to be so much bigger than what it was, I think, because it was really well written with some really great and elaborate lore behind the horror. part of it, and it really was just a great experience, and it scared the pants off me at 17. And so I could really recommend this book, Skin Medicine. Pick it up on Kindle at least, because I think that's the only place you can anymore. Read it. It is a really good book, and it was, at least to me, and still is to me, the scariest thing that I have ever read. So yeah, Skin Medicine by Tim Curran, scariest book I've ever read. Have you read Skin Medicine? I'm doubting that most people have, because this is such a small kind of underground book. But more people need to read it. That's why I'm saying buy this book, read it, see if it's as scary to you as it was to me. Um, and yeah, I think I should probably read more of Tim Curran's books, because this was just great. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to like, subscribe, help the channel out a little bit. And until next time, peace.